And this will be used. The recording will be used for something else, but maybe a couple people will pop in here that know the name Troy, and it's Stende, right?
Stende.
Stende. Troy
Stende.
Stende. I'm
Hmm.
with Troy Stende, and I'm just super excited. I've been able to interview some people that I consider legends, and these are people I call them legends because before I ever got a speech check, I'm looking these people up. Like I'm figuring out. I'm like, how can I do this? How can I do this? And the thing about Troy that I don't remember where I saw the video, but I saw a video of this speaker doing backflips on a stage. And I was like, yo, I said, that's the most insane thing I've ever seen in my life. Is he like a gymnast or something? Like who
Yeah.
is this dude? And so when I started researching like how you become a professional speaker and all these different things, one of the first organizations I found out about was APCA, APCA. Shout out to Eric Lambert. And so I start looking at all these people and start talking to people. I start talking to, you know, um, Tom Kriegelstein and Delatoro McNeil and all these different people, and different names come up. When you start asking about different people, and I remember Tom specifically saying, "Hey, have you looked up Troy Stende?" And I was like, "Who's that?" Then I go and look, and it's the back flipping speaker. Like I was like,
That's me.
I said, "Man, he is killing the game." By the time I'm doing this research, it's like 2008, 2009, and Troy had already been in the game for a decade at that moment, and so I'm just excited that he has agreed to have this interview with me. Troy, how you doing? How you living, sir?
Doing great, and enjoying the lockdown. I mean, enjoying. It's a little bit different, but my hair reflects the lockdown status. It's longer than it's been since high school, I think. It's pretty
Wow.
different look for me, but doing good, doing good. Enjoying. I'm actually. Uh, we're enjoying ourselves. My wife and the little guy are really having a good time in this lockdown, and it in a bizarre way, but
Yeah,
it's good. It's good.
for sure. The quarantine dream, that's what I call it. The
There you go.
quarantine dream, especially as a professional speaker, if you're doing work, this is probably the longest time you've been home uninhibited, unseparated from the family. So
Yeah.
that is good. This morning I got up, Troy, and I made breakfast for the family. And
Yeah.
I felt like a real dad. I
Uh-huh.
felt like a real dad.
Another traveling dad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was really cool, but I wanted to have you on, Troy, because you've been in this game, in this market, in the college market, for a very long time, and a lot of speakers
Mhm.
that come in have different thoughts. I know I was one of those speakers, Troy. I was like, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna do the college market for like 4 or 5 years. Then I'm gonna make like $1 bazillion, and then I'm gonna graduate and I'm gonna go to corporate, and then I'm gonna start doing my own seminars like Tony Robbins. Like I had it all in my head, and
Mhm.
then 3 years turned into, well, I ain't made that much money, so let me stick around a little longer. Then once I finally like started figuring it out about year 5 or 6, I like really enjoyed it, and it was something that I've been in ever since. So for you, how did it start for you? Was it like you saw a speaker, or you were a student leader, or how did your journey start?
Well, mine kinda came as a big surprise to me because it was never something I strove for to be a speaker. I was always the kid that when you'd look at me in grade school, especially a girl, I would blush, and I never wanted anybody to call on me in class, and I was just shy. But in college, I ended up working at a summer camp called Super Camp, and I highly recommend just checking it out. It's an amazing organization, and at that time they're doing 10-day residential camps, academic camps for youth, and so I started doing that as a student, and through that I got exposure to being on the stage and speaking and access to content that was really helping change students' lives. And it sparked a passion in me. I was so lit up when I got to see all the other students just transforming in front of my eyes over 10 days. And so it was kind of like a bug. I got a bug, and I got excited about doing this work. And just as a student, a short story long, maybe, I don't know, but I ended up graduating and then becoming a waiter, which is what many good college graduates do, and living at home, and then going back to another school to get another bachelor's to be a teacher. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I do know that I was doing these camps and having a blast. And I ended up working my way up into camp from a camp counselor to a facilitator. And so I'd be running a group of 120 kids for 10 days. And it was very fulfilling. Then as a college student in my second undergraduate work, I have 8 years of undergraduate work because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I don't recommend that path, but it was my path. And in my 8th year, my last semester, I was student teaching, and on campus we had the speaker come do a program called Major in Success. His name was Patrick Combs, and he's talk about a legend, right? He's been doing this for longer than I have, for sure. And I saw him speak, and it was all about how to use college to get your dream job. And in that program, I was sitting with my friend Tommy Joe Castile, and we both were like, we just realized our dreams in that moment. And my dream was, what I discovered that he did was he was a speaker and he made a living speaking. I didn't know it was a career. I didn't know it was an option. So I'm like, that's what I want to do. And my friend Tommy Joe said, I want to be Miss Rodeo USA. And she ended up actually being Miss Rodeo South Dakota. And then she became runner-up for Miss Rodeo USA. So she almost got that dream, but close enough. Anyway, I just discovered I could be a speaker. I mean, that you could do it for a living. I had no idea it was a career. So I was just freaked out about this and super excited. And I went up to Patrick after the program. I'm like, Patrick, can you tell me how to be a speaker? Which, Adele, it happened a lot, right? It happens a lot. And I think it's a compliment to the speaker when you get students coming up saying, I want to be a speaker, because you make it look easy. And so they think, oh, I can do that. So I said, how do I do this? And he actually I took him out to dinner, and he sat with me for that hour-long dinner. And I was literally in shock. I was shaking. I was quivering. I was sweating. I was so nervous because I had realized my dream. And he told me some things to do. And time went on. Basically, a month later, I saw him at NACA conference. And during that time, he had time to research me. And turns out that his girlfriend and his best friend, so Deanna Latson, another amazing speaker, and Gary Turak, another amazing speaker and businessman. And they knew me from camp because they worked at the camp that was like the model of being a facilitator camp. They had the training there, and I was working at that camp. So these little coincidences, kind of saying that because following your passion can lead to things that you don't even know. So I was doing these camp that I loved, that I wasn't making any money, but I was having a blast. And it led to me being able to meet Patrick, or have these connections with Patrick. And at that conference, Patrick asked me to be his associate, meaning I want you to come do my program, Major in Success, and at a different price point. So if they can't afford to hire me, they can hire you, the equally talented speaker, but at a less of a price point. So what that involved was me moving to San Diego from South Dakota and training with him. And so he trained me to do his program. And I literally scripted 50 pages worth of content and stories from my life that related to his topic. And we whittled it down to a 50-minute program. And it was, I memorized it, and, I'd stand on newspaper with my hands to my side, doing a stand and deliver to Patrick, I was more nervous doing that than I am now doing 1,000 people. It was so terrifying. And, but I did that. And then 7 months later, after moving to San Diego and figuring out how it works and creating the program, I had my first speaking engagement. So that's kind of the short story of how I got there. But I think the thing that sticks out for me is when I discovered that I wanted to be a speaker for a living, it was very powerful. It was a physical reaction to that realization. And something settled into me that I hadn't ever experienced before. And it was just 100% determination that this is what I'm going to do. And no one can tell me otherwise, no matter what anybody says, and no one can do anything otherwise. It is what I was going to do, and I was going to make it happen no matter what. And it was just a fire that was lit under me that I have never experienced before. And it was so powerful and so clear. And so it was a driving force. And
That's
it's still
amazing.
going for 20 years. I mean, maybe it's not the same fire as it was that day, but I'm still going and I still love it. So
And that's
that's my
amazing.
origin story.
And one thing I wanted to ask you connected to that, how long did you work with Patrick?
Well, our agreement was that I would do his program for 3 years. And when we made that agreement, he said 3 years. I'm like, I'm going to work for the rest of my life. This is all I want to do. I don't care. And he's like, 3 years. And as it turns out, after 3 years, I was ready to do my own programs. And so I was actually at an APCA conference, and I'd been there for 2 years, I guess, maybe a year. I was there for a year, and then I was doing another conference and doing my things, and I would tell people that I knew as a speaker, um, or I would tell hosts and advisors that I had met at the conference, like, I want to be. I'm going to be a speaker, or I am a speaker, but I'm going to create a program. I don't know what it's called. I don't really know what it's about, but it's going to be amazing. And I had 7 advisors sign a contract with a date with that, because they didn't know what it was called. They didn't know what it was about, but they booked me. And I say that just because I think this is a big part of being a speaker in today's world, especially, but always, this was 20 years ago, is that it's about relationships. And the relationships that I'd created with these people who came to see me speak, yes, they liked how I spoke. They liked my message. They liked my style. But I believe they also liked me as a person and trusted me, because in order for them to do that, they had to trust me. And so they trusted me, and they signed the dotted line, and that was 7 gigs from no name program. And it was all because of the relationships.
That's amazing. And relationships keeps coming up. If you all have been paying attention in any of the interviews, the relationships keeps coming up, and you keep doing your thing, but you keep showing up and doing well. You keep showing up in people's, spaces and their energy, and they get an opportunity to like you. And one quick story, Troy, I remember I did a NACA, I want to say 2012 or something like that, connected with a group at the University of Texas, Arlington, and one of the student leaders sent me something, and it was like, oh, the speaker he's like just as good as you, Odell. He had people crying, he had people, and I was like, who was it? And she said, I can't remember his name, but here's a picture. And then I saw Troy, and I was like, wow, like that. And again, this was a few years after I had started, being able to hear that and see that. For people listening, I just wanted to tell that story because Troy and I, from what I've seen and what I've surmised, we're very different, like on stage, like different performers. I can't backflip.
Yeah, that's the big difference. But if you don't, right?
I can't backflip. I can't do that stuff. But Troy, being able to connect with the audience the way he is, we both can connect to the same audiences. So I wanted to bring that out because a lot of times when speakers come in, they see, oh man, Troy's been doing it this long, or Tom has been doing it this long. Peter, Stan, Odell. Oh, I can't possibly permeate or get in this, but no, that doesn't have anything to do with it. You can connect with some of the same audiences. I know speakers, we've shared some of the same clients, and I wanted to ask you, Troy, when you first started, the world was different in a lot of different ways, right?
Yeah,
The world was
so
very
different.
different. Marketing, how did you market then, or how did you have to market then that you still do now, but you do less of because the times are different?
Well, I mean, marketing then and marketing now are 100% different vehicles, I guess. Back then if you had a one sheet, it was a big deal. And It set you apart because if you had color printed material, you were big. And I remember I had my demo reel, it was on a VHS tape. And but that wasn't in the beginning. Like, I didn't even know. I don't know if we did anything. We didn't have reels, but so I finally made one, and I'm printing up the little labels and sticking it on there, and on the side of it, I printed them all myself, and just sending out those VHS tapes, and we'd print out all of our testimonial letters and all these different things, and just put it in an envelope and mail it off. It was such a different reality. I think that's part of why I make such a big deal of relationships, because that's the one thing that doesn't change is relationships are key to the marketing. And I do know that in my business, I got to a point, I don't know when it was, but it's kind of a tipping point where at some point I just, 80, what was it? 87% of my bookings were repeat bookings.
Mm.
And I guess the progression of my career is how this happened is the first year and a half for me after program was, thank you for coming. That's what I got. Thank you for coming. We appreciate it. And then after a year and a half, so for the next year and a half after that, I would get, that was great. Really like the program. Thank you. And then after 3 years, something shifted, and I think I know what it was, but after 3 years, that was amazing. When can you come again? And that's when everything shifted. And for me, in the progression of me as a speaker, now granted, at that time, it was me doing someone else's content. So partially it was me embodying the content because it was his content and me trying to make it mine. But the other part was I shifted in how I showed up as a speaker. The first shift, I think, was at the year and a half mark, where I shifted from being in my head to in the room. So at first I was memorizing and I was wondering what I was going to say. And people can see that. Audiences can see that when you're in your head. And especially today, it's not as big a deal 20 years ago, but today people need authenticity. If you're not authentic, they write you off, with younger audiences especially. And so I got out of my head and into the audience, and that shifted my authenticity from I've got this barrier and I'm thinking and I'm in all up here in my head to being in the space and seeing the people and hearing a sneeze and saying, bless you, things like that. I could really be present and I could check out a little bit of what I'm saying and think about what I need to say to them in this room particularly. So that was at a year and a half. And then I think at the third year, my big shift was I shifted from just being in the space to loving my audience. And that was a big reality shift for me as a speaker and for them to experience me as an audience. I think it was a fundamental where I'd start my programs just loving them and just sending them love. And they feel that. And I wouldn't say that, but it'd just come across. And I think that made the difference with the hosts, seeing the connection that I had with the students, with the audience, and saying, wow, this is something special. Let's bring this back. Even though it was the same content, said pretty much the same way, because I had a 50-page script that I memorized that Patrick could say 2 words, and then I would just bring it up right from there, start from right there. So it was memorized. So all the shift wasn't in what I was saying. Yes, I tweaked it here and there with, I was better at the jokes and the timing and the pauses and, my stagecraft. But mostly it was just, I think it was my presence as I evolved as a speaker.
Yeah, and I love that, and I want to touch on like that tactic, and then shift to the marketing piece a little bit. But one thing that I heard, and I want to ask you, I heard one of my clients saying, "Hey, Odell, we loved before you started talking, you were mingling and talking with the students. Like they love that." And in that moment, this happened recently. I said, all speakers don't do that. Like, all speakers don't say, "Hey, how are you?" Like, "Why are you here?" Like all speakers don't do that. So for you, I wanted to ask, what is one of those things that you started doing that allowed you to love your audience? Because I think it's a huge point and I don't want it to be overlooked.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a great question. My I think my pre-programmed speaking ritual has pretty much been the same from day one. I had a real deep understanding of state and how the physical state can affect your emotional and mental states. So I would definitely, before program, I would get my physical state going. I would get charged up. I don't know if you've seen speak like Tony Robbins in his pre-speech thing where
Yeah. Yep.
he's thumping his chest and jumping up and down and doing a lot of physical activities and saying things. And for me, my physical thing that I did is one is I would jump around. I'd stretch because I knew I was doing a backflip, so I had to get stretched. But I also like I'd jump onto a chair, to get my leapers going, and I would do a handstand, and I would make sure I get to a handstand where I could stay still without walking, because then I would be grounded and balanced. So that was important for me. So I'd physically get my body going and moving, and then the other part, which is exactly what you do, is I would go to the audience and talk to them. I would get a sense. I mean, I was literally, that was 22 years ago, and I didn't look as old as I do now. And I would go out there, and they all thought I was a student. So they're like, do you know the speaker? I wouldn't let them know I was a speaker. It was too much fun. So
Right.
I'd always just go up and say, so what do you know about the program? And what are you hoping to get out of it? And not that they would know I was the speaker, but I would just say those things. And it would really help me, one, get an idea of what the audience is expecting, because I've gone in there finding out, thinking, oh, I'm speaking to this audience. And then I talk to them like I thought I was just new students. And I get out there and half of them are graduate students, or a third of them are graduate students, and a third of them are faculty, and a third one are students. So it's like, whoa, that's a different message all of a sudden. So that was helpful. But just to get out there and talk to them, it lets me know what they're expecting. It also gets me connected. It really gets me connected. And that's where the heart starts to connect as well. It starts to know them, and when I'm speaking, and I'm sure you experience this when you're on stage and you see them out there and you look at them, the person that you talk to, and you can smile, and they feel more accountable to you because you have a connection, and all of a sudden you've got this person in the audience that's rooting for you, and they're smiling and they're staying attentive. And that is invaluable as a speaker, to have
Sure.
attentive attendees.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's so much easier to have a familiar face in the audience. So doing that, and I wanted to ask you this. I was just perusing your website, and on the side you had our programs are great for, and then you have a list. You got student leaders, you got orientation leaders, new students, exec boards, RAs, all this stuff. So I want to insert a hack for those listening. Go to Troy's website. The one I was looking at was stendeinspirations.com. If you go to that, let's look on the side. Because a lot of times when people are reaching out, they're like, well, what do I reach out for? And on the side, you have, hey, everybody looking at this. This program is perfect for these groups. How long did it take you? Was it earlier in the early years with Patrick to identify, okay, these are the people that A will probably bring in a speaker, but B also have the money to pay.
Well, I think I had a really distinct advantage in the beginning, that I had a mentor. And I know a lot of people listening here are, you are mentoring them. And so good for all of you to find this amazing guy as a mentor, because, I've seen a lot of speakers come in and a lot of speakers leave the speaking world. And Odell is one that has stayed, and he's proven that he deserves to be here. He's earned the right, just outright, he's earned that. Obviously, because he's still going, and he's one of the good guys. There's a measure of character in speakers in this world, and Odell is of the highest character. So good for you for choosing an amazing mentor. So I had chosen a mentor, or in a way, with Patrick. So it really accelerated me in my knowledge of marketing in the beginning, because he had it all down. And so he just coached me through it, how just like what you're saying about who do you speak to, having those listed out. And so it really gave me unfair advantage. I shouldn't say unfair advantage. It just gave me a great advantage. It's very fair. Yeah. But
Of course.
you have to, for me, it was dropped in my lap. That's the advantage. Like I didn't have to search it out. So for those of you listening, good for you for searching it out.
And I want to ask you, when you say a crazy percentage, like 87% of people at one point, were rebooking you and having loyal clients. I know you've had clients for, a decade and longer, like people are booking you. What is one secret or one, not even secret, but habit that you practice to encourage that type of client loyalty?
Well,
Besides being good on stage,
yeah, number
besides,
one,
besides being good, like
number one, being good on stage, right?
yeah,
Delivering the message and delivering what they're hoping you are going to deliver. Um, but it always goes back to relationship. And what is it that you do in that relationship is you stay connected. Um, when I talk to my clients, past clients, I talk to them as people, not necessarily as prospects, not about business. To me, it's about the person and
say
getting
that.
to
Can
know
you say
them.
that again? I'm sorry. I
Yeah,
just because I don't want people to overlook that. Could you say that again?
just talking to them as a person because it's the key to the relationship. And once they sense that you are just kind of doing the pleasant conversation to get to the signing the dotted line, that discredits you in a lot of ways. And then it becomes a business transaction and there's that no relationship. So, I mean, my connections with my clients are authentic. I don't want to say that I'm like, oh, I'm just sucking up to them and making them think I like them. If I don't like this client as a person, our relationship's not going to be the same as someone that I appreciate. Now, fortunately, in this field that we're in, they're amazing people and they're wonderful, helping, giving people, and so it's easy to like them. But I mean, I've gone to weddings of some of my hosts. I've gone to I've followed them through their careers as they left higher ed maybe and have gone to another career, and it's not business anymore, it's just friends. And I've stayed with these clients in their homes when I'm traveling, even though I'm not speaking at their school maybe. you know so it's really been deep connections for me, and lifelong and very rewarding.
And that is a huge tip, and I'm glad that you said that. Not sucking up, because I think authenticity, and I can't remember who said it, but authenticity can't be faked for long. Like
Yeah,
you
right.
you find out eventually, especially more people. I think now, Troy, people don't trust as much nowadays.
Yeah.
So they know, and one thing I like to tell the people that I coach is the people that are hiring you are smart. Like they know that the initial interaction has to do with business, and so they know how to pick up on little cues like, oh, this person is really just trying to figure out when I'm going to start planning the next event. So being more connected to the human and less connected to the title sounds like what you're saying. Like,
Yeah.
of course, it's a business. Like, this is a business, but a part of that, just like all the connections that I had with the people that I interviewed, it hasn't been like, oh, well, let me just butter up Troy for 8 years, and then one day in the future he's gonna be on the like. Not,
Right.
it's not like that. And you just randomly, or me just randomly sending a message like, hey man, how you doing? I saw you, you're doing good, and that's it.
Mhm.
Stuff like that goes a super long way. Being
Yeah.
interested.
Yeah, and I mean, just to give one, like, practical tip you can use, a big part of creating or maintaining the connection is continuing to reach out. So what you can do in a strategic way is, I was taught this by Mark LeBlanc, who's an amazing small business coach, in the corporate world mostly, but he talks about the 25 take the top 25 top clients or your two, whatever you have, and um, set a regimen in place where you touch bases with them once a month, somehow, some way. It's as simple as sending an email because you saw that they wrote an article saying, "Hey, I just saw this. It's great to see you." Whatever, or sending a birthday card. Just reaching out in some way once a month. And the more premeditated you can get in a way, the more planned out you can get with that, the easier it's going to be to maintain, to stay on top of. But what I say premeditated, I don't mean formulaic in terms of inauthentic. Try to make it authentic, but write a card on this day. Handwritten card. That's golden. To write a handwritten card and mail it in snail mail. People don't get that. It means a lot, and do it without asking for something. All of these things are not asking for something. It's just connection. It's expecting nothing in return. I think that's the key to this. Because if you're reaching out once a month asking for business, you're going to the spam filter, right? You're going to be disconnected. So it's just being top of mind, because if they remember you, they remember what you do, they remember the quality of work, and when they're coming to planning, they'll think of you.
For sure. And I want to get you out of here on this. Again, thanks so much for your time. Got the legendary Troy Stende. If you don't know the name, he's Googleable, folks. He's
Googleable.
Look him up.
And there you can see videos of backflips, right?
Y'all think, and a lot of people, because Troy, I am known for my jokes.
Okay.
So when I at the beginning of the interview, they were probably like, "Oh, he's just playing." No, Troy, and Troy, you still backflipping, right?
I just you see my dog. My dog's in the background. I just in February I just turned 50, and I did a backflip on my birthday. So I'm still doing them. I just got to make sure I keep stretching and doing my sit-ups, and I'm good to go. So I don't know how long it was. When I was in my 30s, I'm like, I'm gonna do a flip when I'm 40, and then when I turned 40, it's just like I'm gonna do a flip when I'm 50. So that's what's been getting me through. Now that I'm 50, I don't know. Am I going to continue it? I'm not saying 60, nowhere, but maybe 51. I don't know. We'll see. But I'm still doing them, and I still land on my feet most of the time.
That's great. That's great. I went to a trampoline park with the family, and yeah, my neck still hurts, and that was
Oh yeah.
so. But I want to get you out of here on this. If anybody wants to, look up Troy, he's a phenomenal human being. Like, he's just a phenomenal person. All the stuff that he does, you can follow him. Troy, what's the best way for them to find you?
Well, I mean, you can go to the website stendeinspirations.com, or just Facebook and say hey to me in Facebook. Don't go to the fan page. Just go to the person page. And yeah, I mean, I love to help out, so I'm happy to check in with other speakers that have, if you have specific questions, things, I'm happy to be a resource. So
I love it. And I want to ask you this before we let you go. Who do you study, or what do you study to keep your mind sharp, to keep your skills sharp in the speaking game?
well, I mean, I like to read different books. Like I just got a book on SEO, so I want to learn about that, so I find interests that are relevant in the moment and read that. But as far as speakers, Tony Robbins is just amazing, and he's wonderful to follow. And Brendon Burchard, he's phenomenal as well. I spoke at one of his conferences in the very beginning, and it was a blast. It's fun to watch the progression of these people. So and just to see their top-notch talent.
For sure. And what's crazy, Troy? I've been in groups, a few hundred folks, and said, "Hey, how many of y'all have heard of Tony Robbins?" And maybe, and these are students, right?
Okay.
Maybe 10 raise their hands, say they heard of him. And I did the same thing with Brendon Burchard, like 4 people's hands out of a room of a couple hundred. We're like, I know what Brendon Burchard is.
I'm surprised that many raise their hand.
And that's
That's
amazing
great.
because these are men that we know, their businesses are huge and they're doing amazing things. But I just wanted to add this as we let Troy go. You will never be Tony Robbins. You will never be Brendan Bashar. You'll never be Troy Stende, but
Yeah,
darn it,
unless you do a backflip.
gosh darn it, you can be that influencer or that inspiration to someone like Tony is, like Brendan is, and like Troy is to others. So just keep that in mind. Troy, again, I appreciate you. Enjoy
Mm,
living the quarantine dream, and we'll see
quarantine
you on
dream.
the next one.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for all that you're doing for all these new speakers. It's like NSA says, National Speakers Association. We're here to create a bigger pie, not fight over the piece of pie. So, thanks for sharing the love, and we need more speakers to come in that will represent us in a good way, make speaking industry look good. So train them well.
I love it. I love it. We'll
Yeah.
see you on the next one. Take
All
care.
right. Now I'm going to go study Odell some more.